Hello and welcome to another End User Talk podcast. I'm your hostess, Jamila, your Lady in Tech. Hello and welcome to the End User Talk podcast. I'm your host, Jamila, and as usual, I try to bring you all great content and individuals who are doing amazing things, sometimes things that we've never thought of. But today I have a guest and I'm excited to speak with our guest today, Jocelyn. And Jocelyn, first and foremost, thank you so much for accepting the invitation to be a guest on the podcast. I truly appreciate it. But how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. It really is an honor to be here. I appreciate you giving me the space to be able to talk about my work and what I do and who I am. I'm doing well today. I actually am here in Catania, Sicily, and I'm working tonight, actually. So in a couple hours after I get off the phone with you, I'm about to head into work. So I've been trying to sleep all day, but just ended up groggy and sleepy.
Well, see, look at you fitting me into that busy schedule. And you know what? I feel honored for you fitting me in there. Well, you know what? We're going to try to get all to the points as quickly and swiftly as possible. But for those who are unaware of who you are and why you've been invited to the podcast, do you mind giving us a brief introduction?
Sure. So I actually know your cousin, Daniel. D-Walk and I went to school at the Air Force Academy together and graduated in 2010. So we go back quite a ways, obviously not as long as you guys do, but I met him my freshman year at the Academy. I had already been at the prep school for a year. So I kind of had my bearings about me for a little bit before I met him. And I feel like he was in the same headspace as I was when I first got to the Academy. So I had to kind of calm him down about, what the rules of the road were for the Air Force Academy. And so that was 4 years of that. I graduated. I was able to actually recruit for the Academy admissions team for a year. And then, which is ironic thinking about it now, because it's a better place to be from than a better place to be at. I'll tell you that. So we all enjoyed our time recruiting, but definitely while we were cadets, we all struggled with whether or not we were wanting the dream that we had pushed so hard for. Then after I graduated and did a year of recruiting, I went on to undergraduate pilot training in Columbus, Mississippi. And once I graduated from flying T6s and T1s, I got to go to pilot training with C-17 in Travis, Air Force, California. And I flew C-17s for a couple years before being what we call in the Air Force voluntold to go fly another aircraft called the RQ-4, which is an unmanned aerial vehicle, or a UAV. And that was in Beale Air Force Base, California. At the time, the Air Force was heavy on the C-17 pilots, and we didn't have enough UAV pilots at the time. So they were kind of taking mobility pilots from all over the Air Force and plotting them in the UAV community to kind of build up the experience level of the pilot corps. And there were people that came over voluntarily. I didn't happen to be one of those people that came over voluntarily, but I ended up staying because I enjoyed the quality of life much better than C-17. I was able to be home more. I had just met my wife, Natalie, and I actually wanted to be home with her every single night. So it was actually kind of a welcome change of assignment. And then I was so lucky to be able to get my next assignment in Sicily back in 2018 now. And there's a naval air station, Sigonella in Sicily, where there's a U.S. Air Force side and an Italian Air Force side and actually a Navy side. So there's three different services that kind of own this one base. And I just happened to go on the Air Force side to fly RQ-4s as well. And then while I was here, NATO got the exact same plane on their side of the base. So NATO moved in, and I saw an opportunity to go and work for NATO on the other side of the base. So after 2 years on the Air Force side of Sigonella, I got to go over and fly the same plane, RQ-4s, with NATO. And I've been with them ever since 2020. And now we're just working on our next change of assignment or our next change of station, which will be Korea. They don't have RQ-4s, but it'll be a staff position for our next phase of life, I guess. That's where I'm at right now.
Well, you know what? That is a vast resume of experience and skills and a roller coaster, I'm sure, of emotions through since, prep school and graduating from the academy. What I would like to address in the event there is I don't know if the same rules apply for men and women who are looking, and I'll stick to the Air Force because I know that is your experience is. But if you have someone that's listening to the podcast today and they're wanting to join the Air Force, be a pilot, or go to the academy, is it better or is one more prepared if they go through prep school versus going straight into the Air Force Academy, or going through the Air Force, being recruited through the Air Force, and then going into either prep or Air Force Academy?
So there's a lot of different ways to get to the goal of being a pilot. It depends on what you want to do. It just so happens that the Air Force Academy, when I was going through, we had about 1,000 people graduate and 500 of them became pilots. So the biggest draw of pilots in the Air Force is the Air Force Academy. So if you want to be a pilot, that's the way to do it. If you're young enough to apply, then that's the best course of action. The admissions process for the academy it's just like a regular college in a sense, but so you have to apply and do a normal college admission, just do a normal application. But then you also have to get an appointment from a local congressman. So, part of the getting accepted into any of the service academies is that appointment. And then there is also a PT test, and there's a lot of things that go into the application. I will say prep school, which is right down the street from the academy, but completely separate, is a great way to prepare you for the rigors of the academy. Personally, I didn't have the SAT scores or the ACT scores to get directly into the academy. So my track coach in high school actually came to me with the idea to go to the Air Force Academy because she was in the Air Force Reserve, which I didn't even know what that was at the time. But she came to me when I was a sophomore, and she was like, I'm going to get you ready for the Air Force Academy. And then, so that just happened to be just a lucky mentorship that I ended up being able to build, because she helped me become captain of the track team. She pushed me to go out and join other extracurricular activities like volleyball. And I was already playing basketball and doing the marching band. So with all those extracurricular activities, putting those on my application looked really good to the Air Force Academy. It looked like I was a well-rounded high schooler at the time. But again, I didn't have the grades to get directly in. But how I did get in was I was able to convince the track coach at the academy or at the prep school to basically start recruiting me for sports, for track specifically. And at the time, I wasn't really super motivated to go to the Air Force Academy. So I ended up telling my track coach, well, I don't one-on-one track. So she was like, okay, cool. I'll get the volleyball coach to come down here and watch you. So she literally made phone calls, the track coach at the academy, talked to the volleyball coach. She came down, watched a couple games, and she was like, okay, we'd love to have her. She's an athlete. Let's start recruiting her for volleyball. So I kind of inadvertently was recruited for volleyball going into the academy. And through having the Air Force Academy volleyball coach look at me, she was able to talk to the prep school coach and get me on the team. And then that was kind of my path. Was at the prep school, there are a lot of people who, if the academy sees potential in you, but you don't have necessarily all of the elements of a candidate that would probably do well at the academy, they send you to prep school first to get your bearings, military bearings as well, because I also didn't have those. And then it's just a year where you still get paid like a cadet, but you don't have all the pressures of upperclassmen down there with you. You just kind of are able to focus on just the academics, just your sport, or just getting used to the military concepts and ideals and core values and all that. So that was my path. There are other people that go from enlisting in the Air Force to the prep school as well, or the academy. And again, if you're young enough to apply, you're able to, apply through your command chain, and it's the same process. So they actually have a lot of open slots at the prep school to accept Air Force enlisted members. So that was my path. I was recruited for sports. I went into the prep school. I think that really mentally prepared me a lot, as well as academically, and just got me a little more ready to go up to freshman year with the knowledge that kind of already knowing what to expect.
Now, Jocelyn, you've touched on a lot of things here, but the one thing that I do want to bring attention to is the fact that you weren't someone that was already in the mindset of the Air Force or that path at all. You were like most students. You were just a student in high school who happened to be an athlete, and clearly you were a good athlete. So many students, you have the element that they know exactly where they want to go, what they want to do. They've prepared. They've been prepared. And then you have that element I think a lot more people will identify with is you. And that's how I was. I had no idea. I was an athlete. I really wasn't the best athlete, but I love sports. I absolutely loved basketball. I loved volleyball. I did not like track, but I was just like any other. I didn't like running. The only time the only time I could actually stomach running was running up and down the basketball court.
Exactly. Well, that's why I joined in the first place, because it was what all the basketball players were doing in the off season. So it was like, okay, well, I'd rather stay in shape doing this than doing the, 1,000,001 suicides that we're going to be doing, at basketball 2-a-days, So,
oh my goodness. I just running. If I'm not running for a purpose, I'm not running.
No, exactly. I'm like, who's chasing me?
I'm like,
what are we doing?
Right? Yes. What are we doing here? What's the point? But
but you're right on the sense that there's a lot of high schoolers that have an idea of what they want to do when they grow up, and there's a lot more that have no idea. And if you can, and especially if you're one of those high schoolers where you're spread so thin to a certain extent that you haven't really picked just one interest, this is kind of the military is kind of the path for those types of people. I was so wayward that I had done well enough to get noticed, but I wasn't really the best at any particular thing that I was doing. So the military kind of helped me hone in and focus in on what I wanted to do. And granted, when I graduated high school, it was 2005, a long, long time ago. But it was 2005, but it was a time where it was 2 years after we had just invaded Iraq. Oprah had just done a special on Air Force Academy cadets and how they were predators against women. There was a whole sexual assault scandal around that time. So it was right around a really weird time for the country where, you know, we weren't huge fans of the military in general, let alone the Air Force Academy. So really my main motivation for going to the academy was paying for school, honestly. I couldn't get a full ride anywhere else. And I was like, well, this place is free and they're going to pay me. So I might as well at least go try it out, because you can try it out for 2 years. Freshman and sophomore year are freebies. Go and try it out. And my plan was to go to HBCU, because that's what I've always wanted to do. So I was just like, okay, sure. I'll take Force Academy for 2 or 3 years and then I'll bounce. But that's not what happened, obviously.
And you know what? The other stigma behind, you know, the Air Force Academy and even going to prep school, if you're not in the pedigree, you know, you've got a lot of the cadets or the students there who their family, it's their lineage. And like you said, it's just this thing where at birth, this was already planned for you. If it was the expectation, unless, you know, at some point in time that wasn't the stipulation, and just the fact that you're surrounded by people who went through the academy, who are in the military in some form or fashion. And if that's always what you're around, then of course, I don't have any other idea. I don't know what else to do. So it would be the natural go-to is to go that route. So a lot of people cancel themselves out if they do think, you know, maybe they don't necessarily want to be a pilot, but just the idea of going to, it just has it has this stamp of prestige.
For sure. And I will say, you know, talking about your cousin, I mean, he grew up with a Tuskegee Airman in the family. So granted, he didn't have people going to the academy. He didn't have, you know, Harvard graduates, I'm assuming, in the family, you know, but those are things that he strove for, because you guys have excellence in your blood. Like, you already, you know, have people that have at least strove for the highest, the pinnacle of their careers. I personally didn't know that I wanted to be a pilot until senior year at the academy. And it really wasn't even until a mentor of mine, while he was at the academy, it was Captain Rue at the time. He's Colonel Rue, retired now. But Captain Rue was telling me, you know, there's not a lot of Black females out here doing this. And you can at least try and figure it out. If you don't like it, then you don't have to stay. And that was kind of, I think, what a lot of young people get in their head is like, if you try for something, that's what you're going to do for the rest of your life. Like, I mean, we're talking about, you know, high schoolers that go in and know that they want to go to a certain college and major in a certain, you know, subject and get a certain degree. And then you kind of know when somebody asks you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And that's just one answer for the rest of your life. And that's kind of how I thought at the time. I was like, well, I don't want to be a pilot because all the pilots I know are a-holes. So, and Captain Rue was like, well, you don't have to be an a-hole. You know, can change that stigma. You can go in and be a cool pilot. You can do whatever you want. And I was like, actually, I guess that kind of makes sense. I don't have to be this cocky person that I've seen in movies or on TV. And if I get more people who look like me in my career field, then maybe I can change the demographic. I could change the outlook that other people have on this career field.
You know what? One thing that there's so many things that I'd like to touch on, and we don't have that much time, but what I do want to say is it seems like you have had, and when people don't believe the amount of influence a mentor has on someone's life at any point or any stage in their life, but especially
Yeah.
when you're starting out, how confusing life is, how sometimes you can feel like, man, I have no idea what it is I'm supposed to do. It seems like everybody around me has a plan. I do not
Yeah.
have a plan, and how discouraging and how you can feel like a failure. And you're just getting started. You feel like you haven't
Yeah.
attained anything, how important it is to be able to have a mentor. And
Yeah. And just somebody to bounce ideas off of. I've had so
yes,
many mentors at so many key points in my life, like my track coach, Jocelyn Wallace, who she would call us heifers running down the track. And that was her way of motivating us. But she would also sell us honey buns too. So she was, she had, two sides to herself. But she was like one of the most influential people in my life. And I had no idea that the Air Force Academy existed until she told me about it. I had no idea that being a pilot would be one of the coolest jobs in the Air Force until Captain Rue told me, like, it's actually one of the coolest jobs you'll have, and you get paid. So, I mean, every point in my life when I, recruited for the academy, I had Colonel Carolyn Benishek as my first boss. She was an amazing boss. She was one of the first Black women to graduate from the academy. First Black, and also one of the first Korean women to graduate from the academy. So there were so many key points in my life where I could see that, this had worked out for, this was actually the right decision. Like I wasn't ready to give 20 years to the Air Force until at each different stage of my career, I could reset and say, okay, actually, this is a pretty good gig. And obviously my parents have been my mentors since the beginning. My mom was the one who was, while I was at the academy, and I was crying every single Thanksgiving break, or every, I was crying during lunchtime. I was crying during basic training. I was just like, I'm going to leave. I'm just going to get up and just walk out. And she was the one that was like, okay, baby, it's okay. You can come home. Just wait until dinner time. And I'd be like, okay, well, I'll wait until dinner, but I'm only staying until dinner, and then I'm out. And then I would call back the next day, and I'd be like, I'm out of here. I'm not staying no more. And she was like, okay, well, just stay till Friday. Just stay to the winter break, and then we'll leave after the next semester. And then after I had that break, and I was away from it for a little bit, then I had time to reset and think about it again. Like, oh, I guess I could go back and do it. It's not that bad. I'm not gonna let the naysayers get to me. I'm not gonna let these grades get the best of me. So I was always on academic probation as well at the academy. And then my mother was the one that was always telling me, just wait till the next thing, and then once you get to this milestone, then reevaluate. And then I ended up staying for 13 years later.
You know what? Your mom is a woman after my own heart. I am a mother. I have 3 daughters who are young adult women now, and I was blessed to have my first granddaughter. So in 2021.
Congratulations.
And thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm listening to how your mother, how we Jedi mind tricked you.
Right,
Basically,
exactly.
she wasn't harsh. She wasn't telling you that you have this opportunity and, putting all this extra
Right.
weight that you already had on your shoulders, all
Sure.
this extra baggage that you were carrying your own. And sometimes, we put the weight of the world on your shoulders. Like, you're going to be the first Black woman to do this, or you'll be the first one in our family to accomplish this goal. Now, mind you, subconsciously, you're probably already carrying that.
Yeah.
And then to have, your support system remind you of this great feat, this accomplishment. I mean, and it's a true accomplishment. Mind you, it's nothing to scoff at or to frown at or to brush off. but she supported you in a way that helped you to realize or to think about it. You came to
Yeah,
your own in your own time and realized, you
yeah,
know what? I can do this. And
for
I
sure.
recall doing the same thing with my daughter who's in the Air Force. She's no longer in the Air Force now, but she was. And I remember her calling me after basic training when she was in technical school. She had gone out to Kuwait, and I can't think of the other place that she went to. She was having a tough time.
Yeah, yeah,
And I remember that. And you just don't want to be that parent that is, I don't want to say bullying, but you don't want to add to the struggle that your child is already going through. They're calling you
right,
because I'm aware of all of this weight. I'm aware of what it is that I'm tackling. I don't need you to
right.
remind me, not so harshly. You know what I mean? I
I mean,
need you
I
to
get
kind
it.
of
It's
relieve
not
it.
easy.
No, it's
Nobody
not.
really knows how to motivate, a young 20-something-year-old kid,
Hmm.
because you know what worked for you. Obviously, that could have been very different. Could have been, there's definitely. I've had coaches. My volleyball coach, Coach Penny White. She was harsh, but she was very direct. She knew how to motivate me in particular by being a little bit harder on me, I think, than the other girls. But it was only because I knew what the expectation was. I knew that if I wasn't performing to my full potential, she would immediately call me out on it. So even if I was like finishing first in suicide, she would be like, "Oh, Jocelyn's jogging. Let's do it again." So it was, for me, it's just, finding what motivates whoever you're mentoring or whatever to actually get the fire up under their butt. And it's not necessarily the same for every person.
No, it's not. And motivation is definitely different. And we have to approach people differently. We have to, kind of know. And it's an intricate dance, if you will, to try to figure out what can I say, how can I do to motivate this person, to encourage them and let them know that they do have a support system, and also let them know that this is not the last hard task or trial that you're going to have to go through. Granted, this
Right,
is a trial. Granted,
right.
this is an obstacle, but most, if not all, obstacles can be tackled. They can be overcome, but you have to find out the best way not to put more pressure on the person and have the person give up, or it's
Okay.
difficult, but definitely find a way to do it in a way that is productive to that person, their mental health, and recognizing what their
Yeah.
true strengths are. This also brings me to a point. You've kind of alluded to some of the challenges that you experienced while you were going through the academy process. But when you decided your senior year to take on being a pilot, did you was there anything, or were there tasks or experiences that you went through that were challenging for you?
Yeah. I mean, it's always, you're always thinking in the back of your head, the whole imposter syndrome and, the complex of like, do I belong here? I think a lot of minorities, a lot of women go through that mindset when they're around a lot of people that don't look like them. And while I was while I was in undergraduate pilot training, I actually had a peer of mine basically bring up affirmative action in a way that I felt was disrespectful, and kind of hinted at the fact that I was only there because of affirmative action. And when you already doubt yourself and somebody reminds you that you don't belong, it's really hard to get back into a confident mindset of, yeah, I do belong. I deserve to be here just as much as you do. How did you get here, Billy? So it's really hard. It was really hard for me to get back into to just get my skills up without having that in the back of my mind all the time. Like all the time. The entire time I was at the academy, I thought about it. The entire time I was in pilot training, I thought about it. The entire time I was in C-17 training, I thought about it. I've only recently gotten to a point where I realized, and my mother told me this too, where if, God puts you in a position to succeed, you have to seize the opportunity. It doesn't matter how you got there. There are people that were put into, that were added into these trainings and, maybe didn't deserve it based on their merit. And it shows immediately. Pilot training will immediately expose you if you don't belong, if you don't actually have the skills to succeed. And the fact that I made it out, I graduated, I got one of the best planes you could fly, that I think in itself speaks volumes. I didn't need to prove myself anymore. I don't need to prove myself to my peers. I don't need to prove myself to anybody but me. And, that didn't come as a mindset until later in life. But even still, I do feel like I need to remind myself all the time, like, there's a reason why I'm here. As long as I'm doing a good job, I'm doing the best that I can do. That's all I can give. It doesn't really matter if the people around me think that I don't deserve to be here, because most of the people do.
Jocelyn, this is why we have the mute button. Because the biggest pet peeve I have is the affirmative action drop. That really and truly frustrates me. And it frustrates me because that is the mentality for the reason why affirmative action is in its place. Why it was in place is because you would never give people that look like me an opportunity because you feel we don't deserve to be there.
Right.
And the other thing with affirmative action and diversity hires, as you'd like to call them, or us, is even though maybe that was the platform or the mechanism that got me placed here, before I got here, I had to do the work.
Right.
After I was placed, I had to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
You can give people all kinds of things, but in order to maintain, to keep, to excel, to even perform within the expectations, and we're not talking about exceeding, we're talking performing within just the basic expectation. That individual, those persons have to meet whatever that expectation is. I don't care. You can give somebody $1 million. That person is either going to blow it, or that person is going to go, if they have the financial means within themselves, financial knowledge, they're going to do well, or they're going to go and seek someone like a financial advisor to help them figure out the best way to utilize this thing that was given to them that they didn't earn, since that's what you want to say.
Right.
So,
and honestly,
go ahead.
I cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I used as many resources as I possibly could to fake it till I made it. When I was at the academy and I was on academic probation, I was asking every single instructor I had for extra instruction. I was asking, my peers to help me out on my homework. I was asking my instructors at pilot training to, help me get more critical, give me real feedback that I can use to change what I'm doing to get better. And by asking for help, and that was something that, a lot of people don't even know how to ask for help. If you don't know what you don't know, you don't even know how to correct what you're doing wrong. But yeah, you'll see a lot of minorities and women trying twice as hard to prove themselves. I just recently had a female commander at NATO who was definitely trying twice as hard just to show that she belonged there. And I appreciated her as a mentor, but I also want to be like, I can see the way that people perceive you. Maybe you should dial it back. But then that's my inner dialogue telling me that she should shrink herself, because that's what I've been taught. Because that's what, essentially the patriarchy has told me is what a female leader should be, is someone who, empathizes, but it's also not as direct or as aggressive as a male leader. And then I've had, average white men that have been my leaders, that have gotten their positions based on who they know. And nobody really says anything about those guys because it's just expected. And you kind of just, you just write off the legacy hires or the network hires, and people tend to focus on the quote unquote diversity hires because it's not them, essentially. Because it's like, oh, you took a spot from my friend who could have been here.
Okay, first and foremost, no.
Exactly.
No.
The math ain't mathing.
The math does not math. And the reason being is if there is an allocation, they're not going to go over or below it. So even if there's a quota for diversity hires, and there's also a quota for affirmative action hires. If we want to still play that game, those people who are in charge of that know the number. They know the quota. And we also know that in any environment, when we have positions or a seat to fill, we overhire. And the reason why we do that is because everybody is not going to make it.
Yeah, true.
It's a weed out process. You're going to have those who will survive, and you're not going to start. You may have started out with 100, and you're going to end up with 20. Because everybody is not going to meet the requirements. They're either going to get out because they didn't perform well, or they gave up. They gave into the pressure, or something else may have happened. So there is a quota. So don't say that I took this from you. No, you took it from yourself because you or your friend didn't think that they deserved to be here. So don't blame that on the people of color who got in and they stayed in and they stuck through all of this extra abuse and these extra criteria to try to continue to prove themselves over and over again. No, I'm meeting the requirement. I'm either meeting or I'm exceeding, and I'm setting that up for myself. I'm not doing it because you're telling me that I can't.
Right.
That frustrates me. And I want to say, Jocelyn, I know you've already gone through, but I will say that adds an extra layer of stress, and it adds an extra layer of, you mentioned you go through the imposter syndrome anyway. We already go through this thing like, do I belong here? Should I be here? Did I make the right decision? And again, you're surrounded by a bunch of people who may have been groomed for this. They don't look like you. So there's already this thing that's putting you in a totally different category. It's segregating you or separating you. But you did, you know what? Hats off, applause. You deserve all of your flowers, because the main reason you deserve your flowers is because, see, this wasn't even anything you were thinking about doing. This was not even on your trajectory. This was not a goal. And look at what you've done. You have exceeded. You've even done it without. You did it through a struggle. You struggled. And most people will tell you that they went through these prestigious programs and systems and they aced it. They didn't have a struggle. It was meant for them. And to hear someone be real about it, and you got a double-edged sword. You might have triple-edged sword against you. You're a Black woman. You're Black, African American, and you are a woman in a male-dominated world, institution, and career. So you deserve all of your flowers, and anyone who you are welcome. And anyone who has the opportunity and the pleasure to listen to you speak today should put all of their doubts to the side, because you are living proof that you can be put into or guided into a position or into a path that you never thought of or never expected to be made for you, and still come out successful on the other side. And before we press play, you talked about all the places you've been. And, you know, as African Americans and just some people of color, just people who didn't come from with silver spoons in their mouths, how can they ever imagine being in Sicily or even going to Korea?
It's crazy. It's crazy.
It's wild.
From Stone Mountain, Georgia, about to be on, a different continent.
Exactly.
It's insane.
And you worked for this. Nobody gave anything to you. You worked for that. You struggled, but you did it. And that's something you should be very proud of. And I hope you are. What I do want to learn or hear from you is, of everything that you have done, have you impressed yourself yet?
Well, that's the problem is, sometimes you get used to hearing that, you've done so much. You should feel so accomplished. You should feel like, you made it. And I feel like when I first finished C-17 pilot training and I was driving from survival training to Travis. Travis was my first base, and I had just gotten done with this grueling survival training in Spokane, Washington. And I was crying crossing the Golden Gate Bridge because I was like, oh my God, I'm done. I made it. I have finished the Air Force Academy. I finished pilot training. Those are the hardest things that I'll ever do in my life. And at that time, I was impressed with myself. And then I met, other Black people on the street. I would talk to them about what I did. They would tell me, what you've done is so impressive. You should feel so accomplished. And then sometimes we get to a point where we're like, we've done it all. And that was when I was 23 years old. And I felt like I had plateaued. And then I would call my dad and tell him, how awesome I was. And he would be like, his quote to me was, never peak. It's not just don't peak too soon. It's never peak. So he was always asking me, so what's next? And that's when I was like, well, I guess I got to start my master's degree. And then the next thing was, now I'm starting a family. I met my wife in San Francisco. We just had a baby a couple of years ago. And I know any parent will tell you that is by far the hardest thing, the hardest job you'll ever have, is learning how to raise another human being into a moral and upstanding citizen of the world. That is by far the hardest job I've ever had. So I have to remember to never peak and to never be too impressed with what I've done in the past, because there's always more.
You know what? That's the end of the podcast. That's it. I mean, that's how we end it. I love that. I love that. Wow. That was amazing. You know, I have to put that on a shirt. And make sure I get me a signed copy when you do.
I'm going to tell my dad.
But you know what? Yes, do it. That's exactly what we're going to do. Well, Jocelyn, I have to say you mentioned some of the same sentiments my cousin Daniel had. He was also
Really?
young like yourself, and he said those same things to me.
Oh,
I've
really?
accomplished, yes, he said, I don't know if he was 23 yet, but he was still he was above 25, before 25. He said the
Mm.
same thing. I've accomplished everything that I set
Yeah.
out to do.
Mm.
I'm high on life. I'm on top of the world, but not in a braggadocious manner, not in an
Right.
arrogant manner.
Never.
It was just like you said, that breath that you were able to exhale
Yeah.
and say, I did it. And he went through some challenging things,
Yeah.
and he hasn't told me everything, but the things that he did share with me that, the average person, it would have broken them.
Yeah.
It has broken them because believe me, the tactics that y'all went through, they
Mm.
aren't by accident.
Yeah.
And what I do want to say is, living in this bubble of being a minority, there are obstacles and there are challenges that are put before us or be set before us because whether we realize it or not, these people expect for us to fail.
Yeah.
They really and truly believe that we are inferior.
Mm.
And also believing that we're inferior when they see how we overcome and how we stand firm on our beliefs, even not knowing whether or not we can accomplish and whether we can complete it or whether we belong here.
Mm.
The fact that we do it so well, you intimidate people because they can't understand you came from nothing.
Yeah.
And then you get here and you accomplish, you break all these goals, you reach, you've done this and you haven't even broken a sweat. You're not crying, you're not complaining, you're not whining. Those people also try to get into your head because you've intimidated them. And so the
Yeah.
one thing that we have to remember, people that work so hard to try to convince you that you don't belong somewhere, you don't deserve something, you have to understand that it doesn't come from a place of truth. It doesn't come from a place of reality. It comes
Mm.
from a place of inferiority that they have within themselves. They've been
Yes.
puffed up all their lives. And when you get in reality and you start meeting people that you've been told all these stories about, and then it doesn't play out truthfully before your eyes,
Mm-hmm.
your whole world is shattered. Somebody lied to me, but I can't allow I can't allow my insecurity to defeat me. So I'm going to try to project.
Yeah.
And we have to, we just have to constantly be reminded there are going to be things in this life that do defeat us. And it's not going
Mm-hmm.
to be other people. It's going to be the challenge or the test at hand.
Yeah.
You're not a failure if you don't accomplish the goal. There are other challenges, there are other tests, there are other obstacles. If you're blessed to live long enough, believe me, something else will come.
Mm.
But what we have to constantly keep in mind is one, keep people that are around us that will keep us grounded. Two, as you've mentioned throughout your talk today, have mentors, people who are going to be there to challenge you and make you push harder.
Yeah.
People who are going to support you. People who are going to tell you, you know what? No, that didn't work out for you. But it's not the only thing.
Mm.
People who are going to keep you humble. And you've had all of those things and you've reached these successes. Primarily, you've done it on your own. You had to get through it, but you've had a great support system around you to help you believe in yourself and give you that extra stamina that you needed, that extra push, that extra encouragement. And then also when we do get to, when we look, you know what, I've done everything, be like, well, hold on, sister.
Exactly.
Bump that down. You know, you've had all of those. And I think that you have accomplished, I know that you're where you are today, and it is a success. And success looks different for everybody. Everybody's path is different, but you still need to look at your successes, look at all of your accomplishments and your goals, and be proud of them. Be appreciative. Let them live in it, because you've done it. You wouldn't be where you are today if you hadn't.
Sure.
So congratulations to you and all the people who will have the opportunity to hear your words, and hopefully they'll be motivated and empowered. And I wish you all the best on your journey, you and your family going to Korea. And I hope that you can reach other heights. And I do want to give you an opportunity at this stage, as we're winding down, to shout out. Let us know if you are on socials or if you have any projects. But if you just want to say thank you, this is your opportunity to let the people know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to share a little bit of my story. There's obviously a lot more to everybody's story. Everybody has a journey that is challenging in their own way. And I appreciate you, again, giving me the space to say my piece. I am on the socials. I'm on Facebook. Jocelyn Booker was my maiden name, so that's what I'm on Facebook as. And I'm on Instagram as I am Joe Flo. So you can hit me up on social media if anybody has any questions about what I've talked about today, or especially if you have any questions about at the admissions process at the Air Force Academy. I'm always recruiting.
Definitely, man. See, an hour doesn't give us enough time to get through everything. We might have to do a part 2, but if nothing else, Jocelyn has given you an avenue to reach out to her. Please follow her. If you have any other questions about your journey and the decisions and or choices that you might have about the Air Force, the admissions process, please reach out to her. If you have any other questions that I didn't get an opportunity to give Jocelyn to address today, please reach out to her. But thank you again, Jocelyn, for taking time out of your very busy schedule to speak with us today and to share your journey, your successes, and everything that you've experienced. And we appreciate it. I appreciate it. And I know somebody's going to definitely be encouraged, but continue to success to you. And thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We've come to the close of another episode of the End User Talk podcast. I hope that what you've heard today will leave you feeling empowered. Thank you for listening. And remember, every day's a training day.